Easy Explain the Philosophy of Leibniz. Introduction. Starting with that, we're going to go right into his life and works, like what his full name was, of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, or Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who was born in Germany in 1646. We can also abbreviate that as G.W. Leibniz, which he does well, and you may have heard of him from his very famous public feud with Isaac Newton over which one of them was the true inventor of calculus. They both came upon it through similar means, independently, around the same time. The jury's still out on that one. You also may have heard of him from being the butt of a joke in Candide by Voltaire. Voltaire makes one of his characters a sort of mouthpiece for Leibnizian philosophy. It's not the most accurate, but he is poking fun at this philosophy and how he doesn't think it could be true. But we'll get into that later. Generally, as well for an introduction, Leibniz, to put him into context, he is the third and final of the canonical big three continental rationalists. If you've been following along, we've already covered the first two of René Descartes from France, Baruch Spinoza from the Netherlands, and now Leibniz from Germany. I also put their lifespans and lifetimes in there as well. You can see how they overlap and also move through time chronologically. If you haven't been following along, just a brief overview of what rationalism is. One of these thinkers, generally speaking, they tend to prioritize innate ideas and the power of reason in the mind. And usually for them as well, the mind is something separate from the body, and it's really something that makes humans distinct from other organisms, from other life forms. And this is usually contrasted against empiricism, which we're going to be moving into next. And that's kind of the opposite idea, that we're really building up our knowledge and our learning from experience and sense perceptions. A good example of this is John Locke. He's one of the first big British empiricists. You may have heard of his Latin phrase of tabula rasa, blank slate. All of us are born as blank slates, and as we experience and go through life, through our sense perceptions is really how we put our knowledge together. We're going to move into him next. But for now, for Leibniz, if you're going to follow along with this playlist, this one's going to be a little bit different and a little bit more unique than the others. Leibniz was a man of letters and essays. So I chose 4 of his essays spanning about 30 years of his life and career. And through those essays, we're also going to track how he develops 3 of his main concepts. So the 4 essays are right here. Discourse on Metaphysics, The Ultimate Origination of Things, the preface to the new essays on human understanding, and the Monadology. You can see the years with them as well. And then across those 4 essays, we're going to look at these 3 concepts. The first one being the Principle of Sufficient Reason, or PSR. The second one being the Best Possible World, or BPW. And the third one being monads, which is most predominantly in one of his final essays of the Monadology. But before we get to those, I just want to provide a slight background from some of his other writings as well, some of his other essays. Give you a little bit of a background on these concepts before we get in a little bit deeper. So for beginners, we're going to start with PSR and look at his essay that's called On Freedom and Possibility, which was from 1680. There's quite a few passages here, and they're all a little bit longer, so I'm just going to highlight them. You can feel free to pause and read these on their own as we go. Moving on to his essay on contingency from 1686. Again, there's a bit of a longer selection here, so again, feel free to pause and read on your own. And finally, from his essay known as Primary Truths from 1686 as well, I'll read this one short enough. He says, "Nothing is without reason, there is no effect without a cause," giving you an idea of what his principle for sufficient reason is going to be. Now we're going to give the same service to the Best Possible World Theory. Again, starting with On Freedom and Possibility for 1680. Here's a short enough one again. I'll read it. God produces the best not by necessity, but because he wills it. And again, moving into On Contingency from 1686. Leibniz actually goes through a very brief little argument structure right here with a couple premises and a bit of a conclusion. So you can read that on your own as well. And finally, to provide the same overview service for the concept of monads, we're really just going to look at a few longer passages from his essay of Primary Truths, again from 1686. Here they are. Again, feel free to pause and read on your own. Otherwise, again, this was a very brief overview to just a few concepts of Leibnizian philosophy in general. Moving forward, there's going to be 4 more videos. Each one will look at each one of those essays I pointed out, and through those essays, how those 3 concepts develop. So this will have a pretty, narrow focus, but for now, I hope that helps.